Howdy, I'm 𝘁𝗸𝗱. I'm the author of the Spirituality for Badasses book series. And I just wanted to share with you a little about my history with non-dual Advaita Vedanta teachers. So I just actually made a list, and I interacted with 20 of them over a pretty intense decade when I was between about 30 and 40. And what I wanted to share with you is the importance of interacting with teachers like this and how to navigate doing so, the ups and downs, the good points, the bad points. I mean, I could go on and on about this for quite some time. But the bottom line is, and of course, it's you have to investigate whether or not you believe me or not, whether or not you think I fit the bill. But certainly, in the grand scheme of things, spiritual awakening is not something that requires the acceptance or approval of others. Spiritual awakening is something that internally you feel as though you've turned a massive corner and things have changed for the better. And this is exactly what happened to me in my long spiritual search, is I indeed turned a corner that I have ever since called spiritual awakening. Again, I really frankly don't give a flying 𝘁cie whether or not you believe me. But here's my story briefly about my interaction with these teachers. So again, I was between about 30 and 40. I'm 53 now. So when I had my final little moments, aha moments of spiritual awakening, it was now about 13 years ago. The decade leading up to that, more or less, was one where I was absolutely and completely dedicated and obsessed with hanging out with spiritual awakening teachers. And I'm going to name some names here. All these individuals, all these teachers, I might have had my moments or days or weeks even where I did not like some of these teachers, where I was like turned off by some of them, or that I had, I was skeptical about their teaching process, etc. But by and large, all of these teachers, no matter what I say, I hold in high regard, and I'm very grateful for all of the great wisdom, advice, love, and attention that they gave me. So I'm going to start with the five most influential teachers: Gangaji, Samuel Bonder, Michael Regan, Solane, and Nick Arjuna Ardagh. Every one of these teachers I was involved intimately with. I sat in private circles with Gangaji, went to many of her big satsangs, did a week-long silent retreat with her, watched many of her videos. She's great. She's got a great sense of humor. As far as non-dual Advaita teachers, I think she's pretty cool, and I owe a debt of gratitude to her. I think she's a wonderful woman, and she does good work. I haven't interacted with her in a long time, so I don't even know what's happening at this point. But she's a great teacher. Samuel Bonder, can't say enough about him. His organization was at one point called Waking Down, and I think he still has that name. He had multiple issues with other teachers in his organizations, and they all splintered off, and it kind of turned into a big California mess. But boy, I love Samuel and his wife Linda. I interacted with them many times. I went on retreats with them, visited them in their home, and spent a large amount of time soaking this wet log of a human being in front of their fire. so that I could dry out and burn up and wake up. And there's no other school that I found that actually was the finishing school of awakening. That's what I would consider that. In other words, people wake up in their school. They're really, really good. And a lot of my own teaching, a lot of my own work has been inspired by them. I'm super grateful to Samuel and Linda, and I can't even remember or count the amount of times I interacted with them when they came to the East Coast, or me going to California specifically to be with them. Michael Regan, lesser known teacher, but a really, really great teacher. No books, no courses, none of that. This is a guy, what he liked to do was be in nature. And he visited my home, and I sponsored him a number of times. Where he would come, we'd have satsang, and I'd organize people to come visit with him, and he'd do private sessions and all the rest of this. But he's not in the traditional sense, at least that I know of. When I interacted with him, he was this way. Yeah, again, no books, no hijinks. Really great guy. And one of the best things I did with him is I did a 10-day silent retreat down the Green River in the Canyonlands in Moab, Utah. Now that's some serious spiritual awakening work right there. It was pretty goddamn awesome. And so I have Michael Regan to thank for that. I did a lot of, I benefited greatly from hanging out in nature with Michael Regan. Solene, another iconoclastic teacher at the very least. Solene, I just love her to death. She is probably the single most the teacher that I had to my home the most. I was during this decade, I sponsored a lot of teachers. Like, I actually went to the airport, picked them up, I helped them arrange satsang, I helped them to put on these meetings where they would meet the public, where they would provide private sessions, etc. And Solene, I probably did that with the most. And I really got to know her. And I think the greatest benefit of my interaction with Solene was she showed me that spiritual awakening includes your flaws. And she had plenty of them. But boy, was she courageous in her teaching work despite her flaws. And that really, really helped me a lot, because when you begin to see the flaws in the teacher and how they're able to, they're just human beings too. And when you see that, yet that they paradoxically also awakened to some internal quality of themselves, it really, when you see that up and close and you see the dirty nitty gritty of it, it really, really is, inspirational. So Solene really, really helped me to do that. 𝘃𝗸𝗱𝗃, he's at one point I think he was pretty famous amongst the spiritual awakening neo-Advaita Vedanta teachers, and I know he's a very well-known author. Same thing, picked him up at the airport. He stayed at my home. Arranged a big satsang for him. I think I only did that with him once, maybe. I did have a number of private sessions and interactions with him on the telephone or something along those lines. But I hung out with him for a good solid week, and I really liked him too. He was a pit bull in the Advaita world, and he really, really was a fierce advocate of the awakening process, and had his own methodology and his own particular techniques and anti-techniques and doings and non-doings, and he was great. I really liked Nick a lot, or Arjuna, as I think he was known to us. Really great guy. And I don't know why I didn't continue to interact with him. I just kind of did one thing. I guess it was enough. Some of these teachers, you gel with, and some of them that you do a little bit, and some of them that you don't gel with. And he was good, but I didn't gel with him so completely that I wanted to hang out with him for a bunch of times. So those were the main 5 that I really, really, again, as I said before, soaked my bones, my old wet bones in front of, in order to dry out and burn up and wake up. And they really, really helped me to accomplish that. The second set of teachers here were just more on the well-known side. But I didn't have much interaction, and you'll understand why once I read the list here, because there's just not a lot of, when the teachers get to this certain level, there's not a lot of interaction. So Advaita, one of the last great big American gurus. I went to the Mountain of Attention out in California once or twice. I actually saw him, interacted, which was not like one-on-one or anything. When I say interacted, it was like a big group occasion and whatnot. I think what I most got out of Advaita was his books and his videos, which was a tremendous impact on me early, even before I was 30. I was in my 20s. Ram Dass. I met Ram Dass before he died, before he passed away. He was at the Omega Center in upstate New York. He was outside in a wheelchair smoking a cigarette, and I sat there before he went on stage and chit-chatted with him. And it just tickled my heart. He's such a icon in the spirituality world. I mean, really just one of the greats. I just sat there, and it's like, we just were like talking, like, two guys hanging out, sharing a cigarette or something. It was just so cool. That was it with Ram Dass. 𝘁cie, he's now big and huge, and I have zero to do with him, and really I'm not into that whole kind of like what he's turned into, which is this big kind of like worshiping guru BS. I saw him when he was first starting out in a very tiny room, and there were like maybe 10 or 15 people there. And I thought, wow, this is really refreshing. This is really cool, because this is an African American who's woken up, and there just weren't many of them at that time. And it was really a beautiful thing to experience. And I liked his work back then, but then it turned into this big thing that it is now, and I have no interest. But more power to 𝘁cie if he's helping people. That's all good. Francis Lucille. Same thing. I sat with him a number of times when he came to Washington, D.C. area, and I liked him, but I was never into the whole really philosophical, heady version of non-duality and Advaita Vedanta. And he at times he could be really clear and gentle and down to earth and really great, and other times he would go off into philosophical la land, and it would drive me nuts. But I enjoyed my interaction with him, and again, he's one of these characters that has gone on to help a lot of people, and more power to him. Another icon in this field is Andrew Cohen, who I met a couple of times. I just thought the world of Andrew. I just thought he was a really good guy, and he had all sorts of troubles with his big organization. And when an organization gets that big, you're going to have troubles. But at the times that I met him, I was just like, here was a guy I really felt I just could fist bump him. He was a cool guy. I interacted with him a number of times, specifically when he would give a public meeting. And one time that really endeared me to him was, it was a Borders Books in Baltimore. He shows up and no one's there, and no one, and he was like, comes up to me and is like, I think this is going to be a bust. And like, so we got into this conversation. It was really, really great. And we just talked, down, this is when he was pretty at the height of his, it was really weird that no one showed up. So we waited for like a half an hour. There was something that happened, and then a handful of people did show up, and I was the only one who was like really kind of like present and awake during that. And I asked questions, and it was really, I felt like I was getting a private session with him. So I have a special place in my heart for Andrew Cohen. I think he's just completely awesome. So I had, that set of teachers. Again, not a lot of interaction, but very poignant one time or maybe a couple times specific interaction that was powerful and productive and important. So the last group of teachers were kind of like at the time, this was in the 90s or so, a pool of Advaita Vedanta and spiritual, non-dual spiritual teachers started to emerge. When they first kind of came out of the woodworkers in the 90s, they all got back from India while sitting with 𝘁cie and started to do their thing. So there are a lot of lesser known ones that were fairly easy to access. They had their own small teachings, and quite a few of them I hung out with. And I can't even remember all their names, honestly. But the ones that I did, I'll write down here. Lawrence and Ardalisa, they were out in California, and they were part of the Advaita Samuel Bonder group. Phil Servideo, same thing. He was part of the Advaita Samuel Bonder group, where they woke up in that context. And I visited them, hung out with them. I think once in our at least a couple of times, 𝘃𝗸𝗱 video just once at a Chinese restaurant. I was like, when you're new at this, it's intimidating to actually meet one-on-one with a spiritual awakened individual, because you feel like you don't know where they're coming from. You have this idea representation in your head that they are this great being. Sit down across from one of the Chinese in a Chinese restaurant and see how quickly that your starstruck position gets evaporated. It was really, really great, and I immensely enjoyed Phil's a non-teacher. He doesn't even teach anymore, at least the last time I heard from him. So Eli Jackson Bear, that's Gangaji's husband. I sat with him a couple of times, and I thought he was cool. He did the whole, what was that thing? Geez, I can't remember. He was really into this sort of personality. I'll think of it in a second here. But he would, it's a methodology, sort of an old astrological or something method of deciphering the personality, and it was too wonky for me. But I liked, by and large, he was a pretty cool guy. I know he's a big pot smoker, but he admitted that a couple times during satsang, which was kind of cool. Pamela Wilson, not my cup of tea at all. But I did sit with her once or twice. Way too gushy mushy for me in that arena. But nonetheless, I hung out with her a few times. A. Ramana was the first spiritual awakening teacher, Advaita Vedanta, a student of obviously of Ramana Maharshi and Papaji and whatnot. He was the first spiritual awakening teacher that said "fuck" during satsang. And I perked up during that, and I thought, oh my God, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. He said fuck during satsang, and I was like, okay, now this guy's got some balls. And he was kind of like this 90-proof Harley Davidson riding motherfucker who didn't give a shit about anybody or anything, and he was willing to insult your ego. He was willing to insult. And I took a lot from that, and clearly my own work these days as an author and teacher was inspired by the single uttering of fuck from A. Ramana and satsang. So funny. He passed away, I think, maybe a decade ago. So shortly after I had interacted with him. The Enneagram. That's what Eli Jackson Bear was into, the Enneagram. Not my thing at all. The Enneagram, just now remembered it. Who else I got here? A couple of teachers. So under Sanyal Bonder. So Sanyal, what was really genius about his teaching work was that there was a lot of people waking up, and then those individuals would become teachers, and you could hang out with them. You could get private sessions with them. You could visit them during meditation, and I did so. And I remember one, his name was Ted Strauss, real cool guy. The others that I interacted with, I really can't remember. And that's about it. There's some that I'm not missing, some names I'm forgetting. I think, if anything, the takeaway from this particular video from J. Stuart Dixon, who's now out peddling his own spiritual awakening wares in a very iconoclastic and funny and weird way through my books. Here's the message of this video: is if you think that you can wake up on your own, I think you're wrong. You cannot do it on your own. It is an impossibility. I spent more than a decade hanging out with 20 non-dual Neo-Advaita teachers, and that's what it took to wake up. I had a ton of interaction. That's what it took for this person to become a spiritual badass, for this person to spiritually awaken. It took 20 teachers. Maybe I was a dunce. Fine. Okay. I needed that number of teachers, and maybe others can get that kind of intensity and that kind of love and care and lion and lamb from just a handful of teachers, or maybe from one teacher, but I doubt it. I needed 20. And so I definitely advocate in my own work that you need to become a spiritual awakening, non-duality, Neo-Advaita Vedanta slut like I did. If such a thing is even possible. There is no figuring out, or no comprehending the mystery that the interaction with a teacher imbues, that the interaction with another human being who is awake, there's no like comparison. And so it really does take this mysterious process of hanging out like as if your right brain or your subconscious just needs that interaction to really kind of get it. And oddly enough, I write about this in my books, but I'm not sure that it is construed that way. I still think there's a lot of individuals out there who think that they can just read a book or watch some videos or bicker, like probably what's going to happen with this video in the comment sections, bicker about this and that and the other thing, and none of that shit's going to wake you up. It's like we're talking about jumping in the water, we're talking about taking a deep dive, we're talking about going into the depths of the ocean, but you're all just standing on the shore. You're all just fucking standing on the shore. You got to get in the water. You got to get messy. You got to get real. You got to get down and dirty, like I did with all of these teachers. And I'm so grateful that I did. I owe a world of debt to all these individuals. My life has dramatically changed upon awakening. And so, you know, the last thing I'll say is, what do I mean by that? How did it change? I'm no longer depressed. I'm no longer feel separate. I no longer feel like I'm lost in a world that I don't belong. Everything is okay. There's this sense that I'm okay and I'm at peace and at one with this whole crazy chaos of a dream of existence. And that's all I ever wanted. That's all I ever wanted, was to feel a sense of okayness and to feel a sense of happiness and to feel like it was okay to be here in this place. And it's hard to be here. And I overcame that. And for 13 years now, I've walked this earth with a sense that I'm connected, that I have peace, that I have this quality of this subtle sense of okayness and happiness that's always pervading in the background. And that's what awakening is for me. I hope that you can find that yourself. Go out and interact with teachers. That's the message of this. I'm creating this video on the second day of 2023. Happy New Year to everybody. And may you have a year that is filled with prosperity and awakening and happiness. Take care. Bye-bye.